Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting place, Azerbaijan, a country whose people, well, they defy easy categorization.
They really do.
If you were to arrive in Baku, the
Yeah.
capital, you step into these huge crowds, and honestly, the first thing that hits you is the sheer physical diversity.
Yeah. It's immediately striking.
You'll see faces that look, typically European, others that seem very Middle Eastern, and then some with clear Central Asian features. People even say sometimes siblings in the same family can look like they're from different continents.
That's a common observation, yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this. Our mission for this deep dive, using the historical and genetic sources we've gathered, is to figure out how this relatively small nation packs in such a massive range of physical appearances.
And the sources are pretty clear on the main driver. It really boils down to one huge factor: location, location, location.
Right.
Azerbaijan is smack dab in the Caucasus, which has always been one of history's major crossroads. Think of it as the essential land bridge connecting Europe and Asia north to south, east to west.
A constant flow of people for millennia.
Exactly. It's been a massive melting pot for thousands of years. And that intense, continuous mixing is precisely why modern Azerbaijanis look the way they do. It's a true genetic mosaic.
So this isn't about, modern immigration trends necessarily. You're saying this diversity is literally woven into the national DNA from way back.
Absolutely. It's fundamental. Think about the history. You had Persians coming up from the south, various Turkic groups migrating west, Arabs moving through, the Mongols.
A huge sweep.
A huge sweep. And then later, the Russians expanding south. All these major groups passed through Azerbaijan. And importantly, they didn't just pass through. They mixed with the local populations, the established tribes already living in the Caucasus Mountains.
And the sources actually put numbers on this blend, right? That's what really helps clarify it.
They do. There are some quite specific 2017 genetic studies mentioned. They show that modern Azerbaijanis share roughly 30 to 35% West Asian ancestry that's mostly linked back to ancient Persian influence. Then you add about 25 to 30% indigenous local ancestry. And we need to be careful here with terminology.
Right, because Caucasian ancestry means something very specific geographically, not the broader racial term used sometimes in the West.
Exactly. When geneticists talk about Caucasian ancestry in this context, they mean the specific genetic markers of the native peoples of the Caucasus Mountains themselves, groups like the ancient Caucasian Albanians. It's tied to the place.
Got it. So West Asian plus this local Caucasus mountain ancestry.
Those are two big streams, but then you absolutely have to factor in the roughly 20% Central Asian Turkic component. This reflects those major migrations and the linguistic shift later on. Plus, you've got smaller traces from Eastern Europe and other parts of the Middle East.
So if you put those numbers together, maybe 35% West Asian, 30% indigenous Caucasus, 20% Turkic, it suddenly clicks. That's why one brother might look quite European and the sister might look much more Persian. The family literally carries different proportions of that history.
Precisely. The variation within families can be explained by these differing ancestral dosages.
Okay, let's shift to maybe the most visually obvious traits, the ones that really stand out regionally.
Right.
Eye color and skin tone. Because if you look at surrounding countries like Turkey or Iran, dark eyes are overwhelmingly dominant. Azerbaijan seems different.
It's genuinely remarkable. The research indicates that somewhere around 25 to 30% of Azerbaijanis have light eyes, so blue, green, or gray.
Wow, up to 30%.
Yeah. And think about it, Azerbaijan is a Muslim-majority nation, geographically sandwiched between populations with predominantly dark eyes. That figure is exceptionally high for the area.
So what's the story behind keeping those light eye genes so prevalent?
Well, it's a layered history. It likely starts with those ancient indigenous Caucasian groups, like the Caucasian Albanians we mentioned, who carried lighter features.
Okay, the original substrate.
Right. Then the later migrations of Turkic peoples, who generally brought darker features, would have diluted that somewhat.
Makes sense.
But then you have the more recent and quite long influence of the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union, stretching across the 19th and 20th centuries. That sustained contact with Slavic and other European groups seems to have reinforced the existing light eye genes.
Ah, so it's like a push and pull over centuries. Dilution, then reinforcement.
Exactly. It kept that percentage surprisingly high compared to neighbors. It's a fascinating genetic ebb and flow.
And skin tone shows a similar complexity, but with a really clear geographical split, doesn't it? Highlighting how local environment played a role.
Yes, the sources mention specific melanin index averages, and the contrast between the north and south is quite stark. In the northern mountain regions, historically less direct sun, lower UV, the average index is around 29.8.
Okay, lighter skin on average in the mountains.
Yeah.
Compared to the southern lowlands, nearer Iran, more sun.
There it jumps significantly. The average melanin index in the south is about 36.4, much higher. It points directly to adaptation. Highland groups adapted to less sun, southern groups to more intense sun exposure.
But this scientific reality kind of clashes with cultural norms, or at least perceived norms. The sources talk about a bias.
They do, and this is where we start touching on identity politics. There's a noted tendency in Azerbaijani media and popular culture to celebrate or maybe idealize lighter skin tones.
A preference for the European look.
That's the term sometimes used, yeah. It's a debated, lingering preference, even though it only represents a portion of the population, especially when you consider the generally darker complexions more common in the rural South.
And you mentioned the Soviet influence earlier. Does that play into why lighter features might have been favored historically?
Absolutely. During the Soviet period, the sort of cultural center, the power structure, was heavily Russian and Slavic influenced. So when state media portrayed ideals of beauty, it often leaned towards lighter skin, lighter eyes, sharper features reflecting the dominant Soviet aesthetic.
So that created a kind of standard.
It did, an ideal that seems to have outlasted the Soviet Union itself, even though it doesn't fully match the nation's actual very diverse genetic makeup. It's a sort of cultural echo we see elsewhere, too.
That adds a lot of important context.
Okay.
Okay, moving beyond color, let's talk physical structure. Hair, height, facial features, these also show that incredible range. What do the stats say about averages there?
Well, there was a 2019 study cited that broke down hair types. It found about 65% of Azerbaijanis have straight hair, 25% wavy, and maybe 10% properly curly.
Okay, and color.
Color is mostly dark, about 60% jet black, but then 30% have medium or light brown hair. And here's another surprising detail. Around 5 to 7% are reported to have natural blonde or even red hair.
Wow, 5 to 7% blonde or red. And again, I'm guessing those lighter hair colors are more common in certain areas.
You guessed it. They tend to concentrate in the north and west, closer to the Caucasus Mountains, closer to historical migration routes from Georgia and Russia. It reinforces that Caucasian and Eastern European genetic input again.
Fascinating how consistent that geographical pattern is. Now, what about height? If Azerbaijan is genetically sort of in between regions, does average height reflect that?
The averages suggest exactly that. WHO data mentioned puts the average male height around 175 centimeters, which is about 5'9", and women at 162 centimeters, maybe 5'4".
So where does that place them regionally?
Right in the middle. Generally taller than average Middle Eastern populations, but a bit shorter than average Eastern Europeans. They literally sit at the physical midpoint for height in that part of the world. And just like skin tone, height also varies within the country. The sources note that men in the northern highlands tend to be slightly taller, averaging around 177 centimeters.
Any theories why?
Researchers often link it to historical diets. Mountain populations often relied more heavily on dairy and animal protein compared to lowland agricultural areas. That difference in nutrition over generations could contribute to the height difference.
It's amazing how diet and environment sculpt populations over time. The sources use this great image, like picture yourself at a big wedding, maybe in Ganja or somewhere, and you just see this whole spectrum walking around. People from the north, maybe with those sharper noses, high cheekbones that look showing Caucasian or Eastern European lines.
Right.
But then right there in the same room, you'd see folks from southern families, perhaps with rounder faces, fuller features, reflecting more of that Persian or Middle Eastern ancestry.
Exactly. That range in facial structure is like the final piece of the puzzle. You can almost see the different historical inputs, maybe broader builds from Central Asian roots in some, slimmer frames and sharper features from Caucasian lines in others. The body itself tells the story.
And this is where it gets really complex, because this undeniable physical diversity isn't just, a cool science fact. It feeds directly into ongoing debates about culture, politics, and national identity in Azerbaijan today.
It absolutely does. We touched on the Soviet era, where lighter features were often subtly or not so subtly held up as an ideal. That created a certain cultural baseline. But then, after independence, there was a strong shift.
The shift towards
Emphasizing Turkic roots, building solidarity with Turkey and other Turkic nations. That became a major part of the post-Soviet national narrative.
Okay, and how does that connect to appearance?
Well, that political narrative inherently tends to highlight features associated more with Central Asian and Anatolian Turkic populations, often darker hair, maybe more oval faces,
Right.
which is perfectly valid for a large part of the population.
But
But it potentially sidelines or creates tension for, say, the quarter of the population with light eyes or features clearly linked to their indigenous Caucasian or Persian heritage. They don't necessarily fit that specific Turkic-centric image neatly.
so when the national story emphasizes one particular heritage strand, what happens to citizens whose own faces clearly tell a different, or at least a more mixed story? Does this create real friction?
It definitely fuels the national conversation about who are we.
Mm.
It puts people in a position of having to perhaps choose or navigate different facets of their identity. Are they primarily Turkic? Are they Caucasian? Are they Persian influenced? The sheer diversity forces these questions.
Yeah, I can see that.
Some argue strongly that the only authentic way forward is to embrace the mosaic itself as the defining national characteristic, rather than trying to privilege one thread over others for political convenience.
And how people outside Azerbaijan see them must highlight this internal complexity too. The sources mention they often get mistaken for other nationalities.
Constantly. Depending entirely on an individual's specific features, an Azerbaijani might be mistaken for Turkish, Iranian, Russian, Georgian. There's no single globally recognized Azerbaijani look.
You can even see this contrast embodied in some of their most famous people, like chess grandmaster Timur
Right. Very fair skin, striking green eyes, clearly shows that Northern Caucasian genetic influence.
And then compare him to, say, world champion wrestler Haji Aliyev.
Totally different look. Olive skin, dark curly hair, fuller features much more reflective of those Turkic and Southern elements.
And both are national heroes representing Azerbaijan.
Exactly. Both are equally Azerbaijani, but their very different appearances become, in a way, symbols in this ongoing domestic conversation about what the true national image is or should be. Their success highlights the diversity. So if you tie all these threads together, the history, the genetics, the cultural debates, the conclusion from the data seems pretty unavoidable.
Which is?
There just isn't one single monolithic Azerbaijani look. It doesn't exist. The defining feature is the mix. It's the genetic mosaic created by being at this incredible crossroads of Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia for literally millennia.
So wrapping this up for our listeners, what's the big takeaway? It's that the face of Azerbaijan today is a direct, living result of centuries upon centuries of movement, conquest, trade, and mixing.
Yeah, a population where you genuinely find the whole spectrum skin from very fair to deep bronze, eyes from blue to black, builds reflecting different ancestral strengths.
The science and history make it clear that diversity is the core identity. It's what defines the nation physically. But the question lingers, and maybe this is something for you, the listener, to think about. If Azerbaijan has to present a face to the world, which one best represents the nation? Is it the lighter features from the north, the darker southern traits with Persian links? Or is the real answer to finally fully celebrate the complex, blended whole and resist that pressure to conform to any single narrative? What do you think truly defines the Azerbaijani look?